Hello, everyone, and welcome to Supporting Youth Experiencing Grief, a webinar for youth serving professionals. My name is Bethany Gardner. I'm the Director of Bereavement Programs here at Eluna, and we're honored to have you here with us today. As we settle into our time together, we invite you to say hello in the chat, share where you're joining from, and in what ways do you support children and teens? Are you a coach, a teacher? Do you work in healthcare, foster care, juvenile justice? Are you a parent or caregiver? Even though this webinar style is a webinar style presentation and we won't see each other's faces, we want to highlight the incredible community of folks joining today. We also want to take a brief moment to thank the Cigna Group Foundation for their financial support in helping us to make ripples of change in the way we care for children and teens who are grieving. The Cigna Group Foundation is the philanthropic arm of the Cigna Group, which supports organizations sharing its commitment to improve the health and vitality of communities. So we have a lot of important content to cover today. We want you to know that we will follow up with an email that includes a link to this recording, as well as links to all of the resources shared during our webinar today. We do hope to have a few brief moments for questions, so please feel free to add questions to the Q&A feature, and we will respond to as many as possible. And now I'd like to turn things over to our two presenters.
Thank you so much, Bethany, and welcome everyone. My name is Sarah Beam Guillen. I am the director of the Eluna Resource Center, and my background is in school counseling. So I think I'm seeing some school professionals here, and hello to some Palmdale friends as well. So I am located in Central Coast, California, did school counseling and trauma-informed consulting and support and trainings for many years. And now I've been working with Eluna for a few years to support the Eluna Resource Center with personalized support, research and development of resources, and also education opportunities like today. So it's great to meet you all, and I'll pass it over to Kelly.
Hello, everyone. I am Kelly Peterson, and I am Eluna's Camp Erin Online Programs Manager. I've been in this role for almost 4 years, and prior to that I was doing some grief support in the schools, as well as running Camp Erin Indianapolis for 9 years. So I have been in the field of youth bereavement for 16 years now, and absolutely love that you all are here joining in today. And I'm watching the chat move through, so please keep using it. We love to see you guys interacting with us, even though it is a webinar. We still want to get to know you in this special way. So I want to first just take a minute and officially welcome you and thank you for being here. We want you to know that you are already heroes in our book. We want to thank you for all the ways that you're already showing up for kids and teens in your community. We know that your days are full and your to-do lists are long, and that some days it feels hard to see the impact that you're making, but we really do see you. I'd love for you to take just a minute and get centered into this space together, coming and going from all the other things, but center yourself in this moment. And if you're comfortable, would you share your why? Why did you choose to attend today's webinar? We would love for you to share your why in the chat. So maybe your why is that you have your own childhood grief experience that felt unsupported and unrecognized. Or maybe you're caring for kids and teens who are grieving while you're trying to navigate your own personal grief. Or maybe you're showing up for kids in your community who have experienced grief, and you often find yourself wondering and wishing that you knew what to say or what to do to make sure that they felt seen, known, and loved. Take a moment to read through the other people on the chat that are sharing their whys. You are not alone. We truly are in this together. Let's read a couple of these whys. I always think it's fun to hear a little bit. They want to learn more about childhood grief because of your own experience and to better support kids. I love that. Trying to be a better volunteer. Oh, I love it. Welcome to our Camp Erin volunteers. Lots of personal grief experience yet. Thank you so much. Your whys really do matter. Your why is the reason that we come together in this really special way, and your why strengthens the impact that we can make together as we all make ripples of change in the way we collectively show up for children and teens who are grieving. So in order to do that, we are going to focus in on some really simple ways to make a profound difference. We hope that after today's discussion, you have a deeper understanding of how grief impacts kids and teens. We hope you leave feeling empowered and more confident in the ways you're showing up for kids and supporting them as they grieve. And lastly, we want to make sure that you know where to go and to learn more about childhood bereavement, grief resources, and support programs. But first, we're going to start with a question in the chat. So the question is, how do people typically respond to grief and other hard life experiences? So in the chat, give me a couple of words, 1 or 2 words in the chat. So this could be, how do we personally respond to our own grief? But it also could be, how do we typically respond when someone else is experiencing grief or one of life's difficult twists and turns? I'm sorry for your loss, uniquely distant, confusion, withdrawal, avoidance, differently, sadness, depression, run from it, shut down. Ooh, these are coming in fast, avoid it. Very uncomfortable with other people's grief. Yep. Hugs. Don't know what to say. Yeah. So absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing and helping us to name some of those really important truths about how we, even as grown-ups, typically respond to grief. And of course, what we know to be true is that kids grieve too. And it is often unrecognized, minimized, and misattributed. And therefore, kids often go without support. And when it is not recognized and not supported, grief can have adverse long-term impacts on a child's health and mental health. So here's another question. Why do you think grief experienced by children and teens is so often overlooked and misunderstood? Go ahead, feel free to share some of your ideas in the chat. Why do you think grief experienced by children and teens is so often overlooked and misunderstood? People think kids are resilient and can move on. Grief stigmas and myths. We rarely talk about it. They have a different way of grieving. Puddle jumping. I love that definition. They look fine and they don't talk. Yep. It's easier to brush it off as just typical kids' big feelings. I like that one because people don't know what grief looks like in kids and teens. Adults can project their own feelings and expectations on youth. Yeah, so you guys are already naming some of the reasons, that grief does not always show up in the most obvious ways for kids. It looks different at different ages and stages because they have a different understanding about death, and they typically express grief through their behavior, as someone mentioned, not necessarily in their words. So their grief may look like anger or trouble concentrating or regressing or being defiant, which can lead to discipline versus support. I also saw someone mentioning that the grown-ups are grieving too, and so they are overwhelmed and they may unintentionally miss how the death is impacting the child. And when grown-ups are around a child who is grieving, that child often avoids talking about the person who died and their own grief experience because they don't want to upset the other surviving caregivers. I also saw some people mentioning just that our society doesn't do a great job of giving us an example of what grief looks like or feels like. And so we avoid talking about death, and especially with kids. The grown-ups feel uncomfortable and unsure what to say. So we say words that are vague, like using words like passed away or lost, or we stay silent, and that leaves the kids confused and unsupported. So if we know that it is often overlooked and misunderstood, we may wonder just how common is it for a child to be grieving? Our friends at Judy's House and the JAG Institute share some staggering statistics in the childhood bereavement estimation model. 1 in 11 children in the US will experience the death of a parent or sibling by age 18. 1 in 11. And that doesn't even account for all the children who are grieving the death of somebody else that's really significant, whether it's a grandparent or an aunt, uncle, cousin, best friend, teacher, all of which would also have an impact on a child. If you are interested in learning more about the prevalence of childhood bereavement or interested in looking at how your state compares to the national average, please feel free to scan that QR code, and I will also send it in our follow-up email. So that's the hard truth. And what we know to be true is that one of the most significant and impactful childhood grief protective factors is the presence of a caring, trusted, grief-informed ally. So let's get grief-informed and focus in on these simple ways to make a profound difference. So one thing that I focus a lot on in our grief support programming is how to talk about grief and what to expect from the grief experience. I focus on teaching these 3 truths. The first one is that grief is the natural response to experiencing the death of someone close. It is not something we can fix or solve. It is natural and to be expected. Grief is a very individualized experience. There are so many different factors that contribute to the way we experience grief. Even within the same family, all members grieving the same person, grief is unique. Each person had an individual relationship and individual experiences with that person who died. And because of that, their grief impacts them differently. And grief impacts each person's whole person. It's more than just the feelings of sadness. And the third truth is that grief changes. There is no set timeline, no order of stages that we have to move through that will help us get over our grief. Grief changes over time, and we learn to live with it and grow around it. So I love these 3 truths because when we have shared language and shared understanding about these 3 truths, we create a space for kids and teens to talk about grief and share without judgment. So we could do a whole presentation just on this slide on the vast range of common and typical grief responses. But again, grief is different for every single person. So we're not going to spend a ton of time today focusing on this part. But if you are interested in doing a deep dive here, we do have some great resources on our Eluna Resource Center that you can scan, as well as look at the email in our follow-up email. What we are going to focus on today is what we are going to focus on today is how we can decrease stigma and misconception around death and dying. We will talk about the importance of normalizing and validating a person's experience with grief and focus on how we can show up and lean in to support them in meaningful ways. And we'll wrap up our conversation talking about the power of connection. There are a lot of misconceptions and stigma around death and grief. I saw some friends mentioning that in the chat. Many people don't know how to talk about these topics well, and we find ourselves tiptoeing around them as to not upset people, especially true for kids. We try to protect them by using softer words or phrases, but that often creates a lot of confusion and isolation and unhealthy, unrealistic concepts of what death, dying, and grief really are. Often we talk about death and dying. When we talk about death and dying, we say things like, the person has gone to a better place. They passed away. We lost them. And even that the person went to sleep and never woke up. We're still working really hard also to change the language, improve the language around suicide. When we use language like committed suicide, it unnecessarily assigns blame. We can remove that blame by using the phrase died by suicide. This phrase can be used in the same way as died by cancer or died from a car accident. Other stigmas and misconceptions around time heals all wounds, and conversations about closure. Those create the sense that grief ends. And especially for kids, it's important that we set up realistic expectations, that there isn't some magic wand or a specific amount of time that they will go through when they will no longer feel their grief. The truth is that grief is hard. It's messy, and it requires one thing from us: to grieve. So here's what we can do moving forward to help decrease all of those stigmas and misconceptions about death and grief. We can do our part to open up conversations about death, dying, and grief. Just think, we might be the only person in that child's life that creates space for them to talk openly about this really big thing that is impacting every part of who they are and what they do. That is really powerful. So as a good rule of thumb, it's important for us to use the words dying, died, and death. These are the most straightforward, concrete terms for kids, especially our youngest grievers. That said, the grief experience truly is personal and often influenced by a variety of family, cultural, spiritual factors. It is absolutely okay for you to mirror the language that they are using. The goal is to create a space that helps the person who is grieving feel heard and respected. We do that by asking them about their experience, listening to their response, and mirroring back what they said. We can also decrease stigma and misconception by telling the truth when it comes to death and grief. Remember that we only need to answer questions as they come and provide bite-sized, age-appropriate information. But we want our kids and our teens to know that when they're looking for information, they know they can trust us to get the facts. Lastly, we can do our part to talk about death, dying, and grief in a way that does not create unnecessary blame, stigma, or isolation. So how do we do it? As we move through content today, I'm going to provide some examples of how to be grief-informed in the way that we respond to those who are grieving. I hope you find these helpful. But please remember that give yourself grace. It does take practice, and we might need to practice these in order to really feel comfortable using them. So when we learn that a child has experienced death, we can try on these different options. Number one, I know there are no words I can say to make it better. Just know that I'm here and I want to support you however I can. This one acknowledges that tension and that wish that there was something you could say to help, but it also, again, tells them that you are a person that is open to talking about this hard thing they're going through. We often hear people say, I'm so sorry, when they have heard of a person who, when they're talking to someone who's experienced the death of somebody close. Friends, there's nothing inherently wrong with that statement. However, sometimes it puts the person in a place of responding, oh, it's okay, and it just isn't. So we can remove that pressure by recognizing the sadness we feel with them. I'm so sad to hear that your dad died. Maybe you follow up with, I'm here, even if you just want to sit, or if you need someone to listen, if you want to talk. What a gift to the person who is grieving. And the last one here is that language that we use to remove blame when talking about cause of death. Again, there's no need to correct the person who's talking about their own grief experience. Sarah's going to share another great resource in the chat for more information about talking to kids about suicide and violent death that I have found really helpful. I will also send that in our follow-up email. Next, we are going to be grief-informed allies that know and can recognize grief in others. Sarah is going to share another resource that highlights typical developmental grief responses. And we can remember that while grief is universal, it's also individual. We can expect to see it show up differently for every person. And we can expect each person to have a variety of thoughts, feelings, and reactions within their own grief experience. And when they share those grief experiences with us, we can let them know that what they're experiencing is natural and to be expected. Often people are surprised by the way grief shows up. We can provide comfort and validation in those moments by ensuring that they know that the grief impacts the whole person, and that it makes sense when it shows up in waves and bursts. That's just how grief works. So here are some grief-informed ways to normalize and validate a person's grief experience. This is one of my favorites. Teach me about your grief and how your grief has been showing up lately. They are the experts of their own grief experience. Ask them to share their experience with you. And then you might respond by saying, it makes sense that you might feel that way. I also love, you may feel like you need to be strong, but you don't need to be with me. We can teach kids and teens about typical grief responses by saying, sometimes grief affects our sleep. Are there times you have a hard time sleeping? Or we can also say, I can imagine that it feels really hard to have questions that you do not have the answers to. From my experience working with families who are grieving, I have learned that even the most well-meant words can sometimes miss the mark for kids and teens who are hurting. I know exactly how you feel is one of those. Really, there's no way for us to know exactly how anyone feels. Even if we had a similar loss, we are a different human with different life experiences. Our grief is different. She would want you to be strong, or you're the man or woman of the house now. That sure puts a lot of pressure on someone who is just trying to navigate this really big thing that happened that's really hard. And then there's, at least she's no longer in pain. While this statement may be true and provide comfort for someone who watched that person who died suffer for a long time, it's best to let them be the one to name it when they're ready. At least you still have your dad, your brother, etc. Or at least you got to say goodbye. At least anything minimizes the griever's feelings and indicates that they should not feel the way that they feel. You should. That's another one. I try to remember to not should on anyone in grief. Remember that it's different for everyone, and we do not need to make anyone feel like they're doing it wrong. Families I work with often share that while support pours in the few days after the death, it fades quickly, leaving them feel like others have moved on and even get avoided. They feel like people avoid them and their grief. So let's be the ones that show up and lean in for as long as it takes. So here are some tips to keep in mind while you are showing up and leaning in. We can check in often. We can respect their pace and follow their lead when they do want to share. We can ask questions and be compassionately curious to learn from them about their experience. The bottom line, friends, is release the pressure that you might feel that there is some magical combination of the perfect things to do or say to fix it. There is no fix. You can show up and use your 2 ears and 1 mouth proportionately and just show up, lean in, and listen. So here are a few grief-informed approaches that I hope are helpful. How is your heart today? This is just a really heart-centered approach to check in on someone when how are you just seems to miss the mark. What has been the hardest part of your week? These kind of check-ins acknowledge the grief, again, create opportunities for that child or teen to share, and again, identify you as someone who is available and willing to have these conversations. You can also learn from them about what has been helpful by asking, are there ways that people have shown up for you that have been particularly meaningful, or anything that has brought you comfort lately? Grief is isolating. It makes us feel like we're all alone, that no one could possibly understand what we're going through. This is especially true for young people. Some of our youngest grievers experience what we call magical thinking. It's that same imagination that fuels their play, but it can lead them to believe that they did something to cause their person's death. And that can create intense guilt, shame, and isolation. Grief makes kids and teens feel embarrassed, like they're the only ones going through it and might be judged if other people knew. And so they keep their feelings from their friends and even the adults around them. We can counter that isolation by creating connections. Really what we're doing is creating a web of support around them. We can connect our kids and teens who are grieving with healthy forms of feeling expression and coping. We are sharing one of my favorite resources with you in the chat, a link to a printable coping skills poster that is a great way to inspire kids and teens to use coping skills. We can offer suggestions and chances to practice those coping skill activities. And I like to encourage kids to try on a variety of skills to see what really works best for them. We can also support them in maintaining a connection with the person who died. Often this is through conversations and activities focused on memory sharing. We're going to share some of the great ways to open conversations about memories on the next slide. Being connected with others with shared lived experience is also incredibly beneficial at decreasing feelings of isolation. There are many wonderful grief books that help normalize and validate the grief experience, reminding kids and teens that they're not alone. I love grief books. I have a bunch of them, and I saw some friends listing some in the chat as well. So please feel free to share any books that you also love that help kids feel less alone in their grief. There really are a lot of resources, programs, organizations, and books and activities out there that can provide support. And we're going to dive into how to access those really, really soon. But first, a few grief-informed approaches for creating connection. What would you like me to know about your dad? What were some of the things you like to do with him? What kind of things have been reminding you of him lately? What helps you feel close to her? I just want you to think for a minute. If you have your own personal grief experience, what is it like when someone asks you to share about your person? I realize it isn't the same for everybody, but I know for me, I love talking about the people that I'm remembering. It helps me to feel connected to them when I remember, and then I get a chance to share about them. I know it's also really meaningful when people know and acknowledge those special days that are going to be extra hard. Birthdays, remembrance days. So if you are supporting someone who is grieving, I encourage you to ask them what those days are. Put notes in your calendar and remember to lean in and reach out to them during that time. You might just be the only person brave enough to do so. And one way to talk about coping skills with a child or teen who is grieving is to share what kinds of activities you do to cope. You could also offer to practice one together. Okay, I want to be sure that you know that there absolutely are some red flags to pay attention as you are supporting kids and teens. Many of these are actually typical grief responses that are just sticking around a long time or getting in the way of everyday life. Another important thing to keep in mind is that if a child or teen is remembering someone who died by suicide, they absolutely are at higher risk. So if any of these red flags are present for them, it's a good idea to get them connected to additional support and potentially grief support, professional grief support. That said, one of the biggest concerns that's brought up by my parents and caregivers that I'm supporting is that their kid or teen who's grieving might be suicidal. I want to be sure we all understand that it's really natural for a person who is grieving to think about death and dying, and to even have a strong yearning to be with that person who died. That is to be expected. The need for professional support arises when a person has thoughts about or takes steps towards ending their life. If you're not sure, it is absolutely okay to talk about it, talk it through, ask for clarifications, and get professional support to help navigate the conversation with them. Okay, so now we're going to spend a little bit of time getting familiar with so many incredible resources that are out there. Sarah, come join us.
Thank you, Kelly, for your wisdom and all of your amazing guidance throughout this webinar. And it's great to see you all here again. So now I'm going to dive into some of our Eluna programs and resources. So as a reminder, if you're not familiar with Eluna, we were established in Seattle, Washington in 2000 to support children in distress and just recently celebrated our 25-year anniversary. And Eluna has 3 signature programs supporting children and families impacted by grief or addiction. So we have Camp Mariposa, which is a year-round addiction prevention and mentoring camp for youth affected by the substance use disorder of a family member. We also have Camp Erin, the largest national bereavement program for youth and families grieving the death of a significant person in their lives. More than 37,000 youth have been served to date through Camp Erin. And then we have our program here, my program, the Eluna Resource Center, in which we're embracing and empowering everyone we serve, even beyond our camp programs, to really provide innovative tools, guidance, and support for children and families impacted by grief or addiction. And then we also have several tools for you all here today, support professionals and some caregivers here as well, that we're going to walk through and share with you. So on the next slide here, we do have our map here showing all of our camps across the country. So for children and teens, we do want you to really consider Camp Erin. This is our free bereavement camp program for children and teens across the United States and a camp in Canada. And you can scan to learn more and find your camp with that QR code. Camp Erin also offers free grief support for kids and families who have experienced the death of anyone close to them. So we've got Camp Erin and also Kelly's amazing program, Camp Erin Online. And so for Camp Erin Online, I do want to highlight a few things here that Kelly does so wonderfully in her program. So the first is a group. It's called Grief Compass Groups. These are free online support groups for families finding their way through grief. These sessions meet monthly and can be joined at any time. So it's a drop-in model for both the children to attend together with their grown-up. Kelly also offers special grief expression events to encourage the use of creative outlets such as painting, music, mindfulness, photography to move through grief. So these are wonderful, wonderful events that Kelly puts on throughout the year. And if people sign up in time, they actually receive a kit for that workshop with all of the painting materials or whatever they might need for that grief expression event. So it's really wonderful and also free to attend for families. And also stay tuned here for our 4th annual National Luminary Ceremony. It's going to be taking place in November, and it's a really beautiful space where hundreds of us come together online to really honor and remember our person together. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the Eluna Resource Center and what we have for you all here. So we really have 3 tiers of support that we offer. So we have personalized support, which is offered in English and Spanish. It's a confidential way to reach out for support that I'll talk to you about in a second. We also have some additional educational tools and trainings that we provide throughout the year. And then we also have our robust resource library and national program guide that I'm going to show you here in a second. So let's go ahead and dive in here with our, one of our upcoming events we have is, oh, sorry, I missed one, sorry, personalized support. So for personalized support, this, like I mentioned, is a confidential service. It's totally free for anyone to reach out to us and request support for their specific needs in their family. So sometimes we have caregivers reaching out, and sometimes we have support professionals and school counselors reaching out on behalf of a family at their school. So in the personalized support process, when you reach out, you're going to share the age of the child, the type of loss, the relationship they had to their person, and their zip code. And all that information we are using to customize a list of resources and programs specific to the location of the family and their exact type of loss. And we usually get back within just a couple of days. We try to keep it really timely in how we respond to families or professionals that reach out through our free personalized support service. And we do offer this in English and Spanish year-round, so definitely use it or share this link to anyone that you serve that you feel like might need help even beyond the school year.
Yeah, and I just want to jump in here and say, I know that there are a lot of people that have this feeling when somebody dies that they want to do something, but they don't know what to do. They want to provide support, but they don't know how to do that. This is such a gift to a person who is grieving, especially a caregiver who is taking care of younger kids who are grieving. So they're grieving, the kids are grieving, and they're trying to navigate the situation. What a beautiful gift for you as a support professional or a friend to contact the Eluna Resource Center, request personalized support, and then share that with the caregiver who is taking care of these kids. So important and such a great gift for them.
Absolutely. And I'm even seeing in the chat some people, mentioning that they missed one of the camps and want some support. So reach out, because we're going to find programs through personalized support, even beyond our wonderful Camp Aaron programs, in your local region or your state. So definitely reach out if you're wanting support. Carolyn or anyone else here that's kind of mentioning that they want some more guidance on programs to find that are in your area. And next, we have our upcoming Teen Talk, which is kind of a newer thing for us. Usually we do community conversations throughout the year with different experts that are usually adults speaking on topics, but now we really want to elevate teens. So coming up on May 12th, so just in about just 12 days from now, we're going to have our first ever Teen Talk, in which we have 4 panelists that are speaking. They're all Camp Aaron alumni. They are all teens, and they're going to be talking about their own challenges as a teen navigating their grief, and also what has really supported them throughout their grief journey. So it's going to be a really powerful event. It's totally free to attend. This is really designed to be for teens by teens. So if you do have any teenagers in your life that you're working with, please spread the word. It's totally free. It's actually going to be on YouTube Live, because the teens are telling us that's where they hang out more so than Zoom. So we're doing it on YouTube Live to really honor that. And we're doing it at a later time. So it's going to be at 8 p.m. Eastern or 5 p.m. Pacific, to really honor the very busy lives of teens and when they can actually attend. So please help us in registering and spreading the word, because this is coming up real fast here. So thank you for that. And next, Kelly and I and the Camp Aaron team, a little while back, we really were wanting to recognize the need for all of us as support professionals to have a quick set of tips of what to do and what to avoid when we're supporting a child that's grieving or impacted by addiction in the family. So we spent some time developing and designing these postcard pointers, which are concrete pocket-sized tips on what to say and what not to say when you're supporting youth. And we actually have 10 different topics to choose from suicide loss, overdose loss, homicide loss, to just kind of these general grief support tips. You can access any of these. You can print them for free, or you can even order this set concrete pack from us as well. And next, I'm very excited to share with you about our recently updated resource library. So we went through a whole revamp of this, got a lot of feedback to really make this even more user-friendly. So on our resource library, you can search and save resources for families impacted by grief or addiction. And by resources, I mean we have so many activities on there, articles, our recommended book list. We have a list of different scholarships that you can look at for youth impacted by grief, conversation starters. So we have so much on there, about 600 total resources that you can pick from to search, and then also save, and then even share with the families you serve. And also, we now have our National Program Guide, which has been recently updated as well. So with the National Program Guide, you can search by a zip code, state, keyword, or any of the filters we have there to find actual local programs or even online programs for youth impacted by grief or addiction in the family. So we have both of those listings on there. We have over 600 or so programs listed, and that continues to grow every single week. So this is really a tool designed for you support professionals to be able to quickly find and share this out with the families you serve. And then the next slide shows one of our also renewed tools, which is how to really become an ERC, an Eluna Resource Center power user or a super user. This is totally free. All you have to do is put in your email. And how it works is when you start searching the resource library or the program guide, and you start really seeing different resources for a specific family you serve, you click the save button on each of those, and you're going to start saving them to a unique list for that one family you have in mind. And you can save both programs and resources just for that family you serve. And when you're ready with that list, you can then click share, and it will give you a unique link for that family member so that they can see just the resources and programs that you really want them to see, that really kind of mirrors and reflects their experience. So this is a free tool. And what I love about it as a school counselor, myself background, is that you can do multiple lists for multiple families you're serving. And it's just an easy way to organize different types of resources for the families that you serve. So again, I really encourage you to try it out, scan that QR code, start saving and sharing these with some of the families at your sites or communities. And next, I do want to highlight a few activities here that we have found to be very, very useful for working with young people. And so these three were designed by the amazing Kelly here. The first one is really talking about how grief can show up in the body with these common physical grief reactions. And there's a really unique activity that Kelly designed on how to kind of walk children and teens through identifying where that grief is showing up for them. Also, circles of comfort is a great way for youth to start identifying different people, places, and activities, and even items that can bring them peace, joy, support, and comfort. So this activity guides youth in creating a visual reminder of those different connections and resources that can really help them feel cared for. So wonderful activity there. And then my last one here, which is my absolute favorite, is called Forever Blended. And Forever Blended is in which the child will take two different colors of Play-Doh or putty or foam putty, and one color will represent the person who died, and the other color is going to represent maybe their favorite color. And you ask that child to start blending and squishing these two colors together. And then after a little bit of that activity, you ask them now to try to pull those two colors apart. And guess what? They can't, right? So those colors are forever blended, forever together. And it really represents how that person is really integrated and always part of us. And we carry them with us in some way throughout our life. So this has been really powerful. We shared this activity at the ASCA counseling conference, school counseling conference, and it was a hit. I think counselors I know are using this a lot. So I just highly recommend this activity to use for any of the youth in your life at home or at school or in your own support network that you have.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in real quick and share that, my goodness, there are tons and tons and tons of activities listed on the Eluna Resource Center, and all you have to do is click on or to visit the Eluna Resource page and then look for or search for activities. And each one of the activities has a description that has the objective, instructions, supplies that you'll need, and usually some sort of a printout or something that goes along with that activity. So please get in there. They are free to use. We would love to empower you to incorporate some of these activities in the work that you're already doing.
Yes, thank you. And then also just one more resource spotlight, because as support professionals, you all also know that often finances are impacted for children who are grieving. So we have this resource spotlight. It's one of our top visited resources on our entire library, and it lists all scholarships that we know about for grieving youth and young adults who want to pursue their educations, their educational scholarships. We have some listed now that are for Camp Aaron alumni specifically, but we also have some other ones on there that are beyond even what Eluna offers. And so we're always trying to update this list and keep it active. So definitely share this if you know of any grieving children, teens, young adults that could really use that financial support as well. And with that, I'll now pass it back to Kelly. So thank you so much, Kelly, for letting me walk through some of those resources. Off to you.
Yes, wonderful. Thanks, Sarah. So believe it or not, the time is coming to an end already. So I know that we have already shared a lot. We've covered a lot of information. So I would love to see some of your takeaways in the chat. What are you going to take away from this time together? I like the idea of putting it in the chat so that it sticks in your brain a little bit more than just, oh, I watched a great webinar. So put some ideas in the chat about what you're taking away. And so as you do that and you share in the chat, I am hoping that this is just the beginning, the first ripple in the ripple effect. So moving forward, I know that you're going to continue making a difference as you show up in meaningful ways for kids and teens who are grieving. I get really excited, maybe kind of excited just thinking about what would happen if each of you that are on this call today could take the information that you learned and share it with someone else in your circle. So who comes to mind for you? Are there friends or a family member that could really benefit from this information, or colleagues that you work with, or even others who are working in your community with kids and families? If you want to encourage them to watch and learn, there will be a recording available on our Eluna Resource Center, and we would be so grateful for you to share that with them. Would you help us keep the ripples going? Will you help us change the way we are showing up for kids and teens who are grieving? I would be so grateful. And of course, you can follow us on all the socials at Eluna Network and share our posts and make sure even more people know about Eluna and learn simple ways to make a profound difference. All right, friends, we do have a very brief survey for you. Yes, yes, yes. Your feedback is really valuable to us and helps us to share the impact of webinars just like this one with our generous funders so that we can continue to do them for free. Find the link in the chat now or scan the QR code. I promise it only takes a couple of moments and it makes the world of difference. And whilst you are filling out our wonderful short feedback survey, please take a moment to take care of yourself. These are simple ways that we can make a difference, but that doesn't make them easy. So we are sharing yet again one more link in the chat to another great printable poster that should look familiar because we have one that's for kids that are coping skills, and then we have a grown-up one that's self-care strategies, so that you can have a little inspiration on thinking outside of the box about what you could do to take care of yourself. Remember that we can't pour from an empty cup, so please do something to take care of yourself today. All right. I think we are going to have a few moments to answer some questions, and anything that you are interested in talking about. We have a little bit of time here, so you can use the chat or the Q&A function feature, and we will absolutely follow up and answer as many as we can.
There was a question, Kelly, about the recording, but I kind of respond to Sarah, but
Thank you.
yes, that we will be sending that out shortly after this event so that you can share it, watch it with anyone that even missed it too. They can definitely watch it that way too.
Yes.
Let me see if there's any other questions earlier, maybe.
I saw someone in the chat, or no, in the Q&A, ask Sarah about guidance and resources for a parent being in prison. And the thing that came to mind was the Ambiguous Grief Hub. Wondering if you might want to share a little bit about that.
Yes. So my colleague Ileana especially started researching a lot about ambiguous losses, which are non-death losses that could be incarceration. It could be divorce, separation, children that have are in the adoption or foster care system. It could be other types of challenges around living with someone with addiction or mental health, and there's some loss in that as well, right? So Ileana did a whole research on this ambiguous loss resource hub. I'll grab it in a second and put it in here. And inside that ambiguous loss resource hub, we have different articles, videos to watch, and then we have several different book lists as well. And with each book list, it's based on a certain type of ambiguous loss. So one of the book recommendation lists we have is specific to incarceration that you can share and look at and see what's in there. And then you'll also see in our hub just different types of articles and resources and videos specific to that type of loss as well. So I'll share that with you in there. And what's beautiful is that Ileana and I are both bilingual. And so Ileana was able to do the entire resource hub also in Spanish. And in the Spanish one, there's a little bit extra in there around some immigration related loss called duelo migratorio. And there's some different resources around that specifically as well, if that's a challenge for a family. So I'll share that in here as well.
And that's another question in Q&A was if the person who died was an abuser. And so the child has mixed up feelings, loss, sadness, but also a bit of relief. And I'll tell you that this does come up and something that we talk a lot about in our grief compass groups and our activities that we do, our grief expression events. And so I would definitely recommend reaching out, and we can talk through some of the strategies that we use. But ultimately, it's many of the same ideas that we talked about today, and just giving them the opportunity to talk about those mixed up feelings, asking about them, and then really validating that it makes sense that they would feel that way, that it would make sense that there's a bit of relief. And so sometimes they feel guilty about feeling relieved, but that actually makes a lot of sense. And it doesn't make them a bad person. It just makes grief even more complex. So giving them more time and space to talk about those and acknowledge those mixed up and sometimes conflicting emotions. Thanks for the question. Appreciate that. You know, Kelly, I want to add to that one thing, because there is a wonderful book. It's called Grieving You and Me, a story about grieving a complicated relationship. And it's actually written by one of our own Camp Erin Toronto volunteers, who's a trauma therapist and clinical lead at Camp Erin Toronto. So I'm going to put this in the chat, because when this amazing volunteer shared her book with me, this is such a need to talk about those more complicated relationships after someone dies. And she really does this beautiful way of walking through that in this children's book. So it's a great way to kind of get that conversation started with a child. Yeah, and on the same in the same book, same page here, we've got someone asking about suggestions for the death of a person who was not loved, very similar to if the person that died was an abuser. And I think that is one of the reasons that we work really hard to avoid language like, you know, a loved one that's died. They're remembering a loved one that died. We try really hard to use the language. They are grieving the death of a significant person in their life. That language is intentional so that we can still support those who maybe did have that conflicting relationship or experiencing conflicting emotions around it. I have someone that asked about my most surprising and best story in working with Camp Erin. My goodness, I have so many. I'll just mention the Camp Erin in-person experience. As I mentioned, I was the camp director for Camp Erin Indianapolis for 9 years, and the in-person experience is something that is just life-changing for kids and the grown-ups involved. You know, it is so incredible to watch these kids come to camp that don't know each other, and they come and they're a little bit hesitant. They're like, I don't really know if I want to be here. And then they show up and they recognize that they're not alone in this really hard thing that they're experiencing, and they get to remember that they're still a kid and do all the fun summer camp activities, and also acknowledge and have a space to process some of these things that they're experiencing. And it just is incredible what kind of relationships come out of that. So I definitely highly recommend the in-person Camp Erin program. That said, we also do have Camp Erin Online, which I also love. That's my program. And we try really hard to create those same meaningful experiences for kids in the online setting. Obviously, I don't have swimming and zip lining and rock wall climbing to offer online, but I do think we have a pretty good approach to creating a space that doesn't feel quite as heavy as what you might anticipate. You know, it's not sitting in a circle and holding hands and singing Kumbaya. It's really just a space that we get to come together and talk. One of the things that I often share about is that, you know, when people are navigating grief and they're looking for support, sometimes they're hesitant because they think that all they're going to talk about is the death. And I remind them, and this is a good thing for you to remind your friends about, that they are also going to talk about the life they had with the person who died, not just how they died, but they're going to have an opportunity to talk about their relationship, the things they remember about them, the memories that they have with them. So those are all parts of the conversations that we have in Grief Compass Group. Yes. And then I know, Jasmine, I put a few different resources in there for you that you asked about for supporting youth impacted by community or school shootings, or all the, you know, this difficult stuff in the news right now. So I put a couple of my go-to resources in there on how to talk about school shootings, but also talking to children about tragic events in the news. And we actually have a filter on our resource library called Tragic Events, which kind of gives a bunch of extra different book recommendations and other conversation starters too around difficult events that are happening in the news or in a community as well. And then did you answer Stephanie's question, Kelly, about virtual individual sessions? I think you kind of mentioned that, right? Camp Erin Online. We currently do not offer individual sessions, but we do have our Grief Compass group, which is a national grief support group. But I'm telling you, it's not these big, huge numbers that you would anticipate. Typically, we have, 5 to 6, 8, in that range, families who come in and are participating. So that space really is a beautiful opportunity for families to come and get some, really personalized support and a place to talk. But it is not individualized in this time. But we have lots of resources that we could get you connected with.
Yes, and our new national program guide, I just put a link in there. It's called, Find Support Near You is the link there, but that's our national program guide. And if you click on the filter individual, it will show and grief, it will show individual grief organizations that offer that there as well. So that is one way to try to search for some as well, but also reach out for personalized support. We'd be happy to help you find some ideas for that.
All right. I think we got to all the questions, Sarah, right?
Yes, I think so. It looks like it. So,
all right, good deal. Well, Bethany keeps sending in that survey. We would be so grateful for you to take just a couple of moments to share your feedback with us. Also, please, please, please share information about how you accessed this webinar. It will be live on our Eluna resource. It will be live on the Eluna website on the Caregiver Hub. I will send a follow-up email next week with a recording as well as links to all of the resources that we shared. It will be very full of all the things that we shared together in our time. And we are just so grateful for you all and the ways that you are showing up in your community. Thanks for being here, and we hope you have a beautiful rest of your day.